What's going on, guys? It's Mdog5. Welcome back to another video. Now today we are going to be doing a Splatoon 2 documentary. Now when I say documentary, I'm not going to be highlighting everything that happened throughout the lifespan of the game before Splatoon 3 comes out. I'm just going to be doing a detailed review of every game mode, and basically the game as a whole. Given the fact that I've completed every single mission with every single weapon in Octo Canyon, got rank X in multiplayer, got hazard level max in Salmon Run, and of course beat Inner Agent 8 in Octo Expansion, I feel as though I am well inclined to make a detailed review / criticism of this game. Hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Make sure you guys check out my other big boy videos, that being my Fortnite documentary and my Call of Duty documentary. Now we're putting Splatoon 2 in the mix. So hope you guys enjoy the video. Sit back, relax, grab some popcorn or your favorite snack, and let's get into this shit. Let's start off with Octo Canyon, aka the story mode. The campaign was definitely a step up from the first Splatoon story mode. I'm not going to go through the entire story, but you are basically trying to retrieve a stolen Zapfish again. And this time, Callie from the Squid Sisters has gone missing. As for the levels, they have gotten much better. The levels are more polished, going from the Wii U to the Nintendo Switch. The levels themselves are also more aesthetically pleasing, with a variety of different walls and ground to ink. I feel as though the levels in Splatoon's campaign was pretty barren and straightforward for the most part, very simplistic with linear objectives. Splatoon 2's campaign had more diversity in the setting, level design, enemy types, so on and so forth. Your ink had different colors that glistened. The levels weren't so linear, and some of them actually required you to circle back to a previous location in order to advance further. There were ink switches that gave access to the other chunks of the level. Ink buffers, ink rails, octo snipers, and bombers forced the players to move around and keep the level exciting. Tentacooks forced the players to chase it as it drops bombs behind it. Octo ballers required the enemy to either shoot or duck and hide as they rolled towards the player. New enemies include octo stamps, hurlers, seekers, zeppelins, and squeegees, which force the player to break out of their conventional means of completing the mission, throw bombs while on the squeegee to advance towards otherwise inaccessible areas. It's things like that really shaped this new experience. Finally, the story mode has a lot more weapons to choose from, each of which are now upgradable. This adds much more replay value to the game. Speaking of replay value, in every level there's a Sardinium and Scroll, which for the most part are well hidden. While on the topic, there are absolutely no rewards for going out of your way to find all the scrolls. Each scrolls gives you fragmented exposition on the story mode, so I guess Nintendo thought that having the full story was enough of a reward in itself. But I went out of my way to do all this shit. Anyways, I'm sorry. I appreciate the fact that Nintendo made sure each level will be possible with each weapon. And no matter what weapon you use, you will always have a pretty smooth experience. Sometimes. With that in mind, you will get the ability to use these weapons in multiplayer if you complete every single mission with that specific weapon. Although the weapon is just a reskin of an already existing weapon in the game, and they contain generally worse sub and special options, or just the same as, again, another weapon. Again, completing every mission with every weapon gives you nothing. I'm sure Nintendo thought having those weapons in multiplayer wasn't enough of a reward in itself, but now I'm sounding like a song on repeat. It's like getting gold camo for all the guns in Black Ops. Yeah, the reward is that I have gold on all my guns in Black Ops, but I still don't get recognized for it, which is why diamond camo was a thing in Black Ops 2 and dark matter in Black Ops 3. When you put it in perspective, it's simply being a completionist for a reward you've gotten 20 times already. Now that I'm not getting anything for these rewards, demotivates me for even trying. For me, playing the story mode at this point is just burning time, if that's what I choose to burn my time on. I mean, I've already gotten all the hero replica guns, so I really don't see a reason to continue with the story mode. Now, the multiplayer was impressive and overall enjoyable, however, it has the potential to be a lot better. Yes, there are new guns that play better than the ones in the first game. Of course, there are new maps that are generally pretty good and fun to play on, but this is something that should be expected of a sequel. Like I said earlier, Splatoon 2's multiplayer is generally fun and enjoyable, but there is, again, lots of potential. I have some main objective points to make a little later, but first I'm going to address my subjective points and then the community's points. Let's start off with what Nintendo did, or what they didn't do, that sort of pissed the community off. I mean, for the most part, they generally ignored complaints that we had with Splatoon 1. The news is still not skippable and is mandatory upon the start of every single play session. Sometimes, if you're in the middle of a play session and the maps rotate, it'll bring you back into the news segment, which is just a peak aggravation. This makes no sense due to the multiple ways you can find out what maps are on rotation. Let's say if the news were skippable and we loaded into Ecopolis upon starting the game, I have to press all of 2 buttons to find out what maps are on rotation. Then I can find out while selecting the game mode I want to play. Having to read Pearl and Marina's well-scripted dialogue, albeit, for each map should be completely optional. Secondly, there is the map and game mode rotations. Personally, I think we should be able to load into whichever game mode we want, which would each have different game modes on rotation. But a large part of the community wanted map voting and the ability to choose your weapon after joining a lobby. I don't agree with the latter due to different weapons having certain strengths and weaknesses for each mode and map. This forces the player to think tactically before entering the battle. I think this feature will be fine for Turf War though, since that's casual. Finally, there's the general online infrastructure. And holy shit, this might be the worst part of the game. First of all, there is no way to communicate in this game whatsoever besides come on and booyah. No, you come on, Nintendo. And maybe if Splatoon's demographic was younger, which it's not, the Nintendo Switch itself should have a party chat rather than Splatoon. If I've accepted someone on my friends list, what's the harm in having a party on the Switch and communicating with said person? It's evident that the game wasn't meant for party systems. I mean, you can invite your friends. The only way you can join them in a lobby is to play a non-custom game. The issue is that the only way to play with your friends in this game is for both of you to have the sudden intuition that you want to play together. One person needs to open up a room, and the other person needs to join. Again, through intuition, since there's no means of communication through the Nintendo Switch. You can join a friend's game if their lobby isn't full, so you better hope you click join at the right time. I've had Splatoon 2 since the first day of launch in 2017, and after 4 years, I played League Play for the first time. I was streaming, and one of my viewers gave me his friend code. We then had to speak through Discord, aka an external means of communication. Simple party systems should not be this difficult to ascertain. I mean, again, party systems have been in the game for almost 20 years, given the Xbox 360 had its own party system. So Nintendo, I really don't understand what you're afraid of. It's annoying. Now that we finished the community's issues, let's get into my subjective problems with the game. First, there's the training section, which has hypnotized the community. I think I just want custom games with Octoling-like bots, which can actually move and shoot like an enemy. This should take place in whatever map I want, and not only the ones that are on rotation, i.e. Recon. This is because the training dummies either stand completely still or move from side to side. Of course, we can utilize this as a means of warming up our aim, but it's incredibly unrealistic. I can hit the dummies with a sniper just fine, but when playing against the squids, moving, diving, and coming up out of ink, I tend to mess up. I wonder why. Maybe because I'm shooting at these big-ass, slow-moving targets, which makes the only way to get meaningful experience with your weapon is by using it in-game. Weapons like the Splatlings and Sloshers were easy to get accustomed to, although I still prefer my straight-firing weapons. Snipers, however, have an extremely wide learning curve, and trying them in-game usually results in you getting your ass handed to you. For me, I'm not going to use them in ranked and compromise me and my team's rank. On the other hand, playing Turf War for 3 minutes at a time with a completely different objective doesn't really help. It doesn't really help as fast, I should say. I mean, all the way from C- to S+9, I've encountered some really bad snipers. Some really good ones as well, but not nearly as much. I feel like a custom game mode would solve this issue, and not only for that reason. Having custom games would encourage players to explore more weapon options, given the opportunity to learn them at no expense of their own. Weapon formats. While on the topic of weapon options, there are certain classes of weapons in Splatoon 2. These classes, of course, fit in certain roles in the game. It's not like Overwatch's healer, support, offense, defense. It's more so how each weapon is used. I like this because it gives weapons certain strengths and weaknesses in different situations. This is also why I like set map rotations, since maps and game modes play heavily into the strengths and weaknesses of certain weapons. However, you can't really use these weapons outside of their designated roles. I'll give you an example here. This is problematic because it denies the idea that anything can happen. If my enemy gets close to me while I'm using a Splattershot Pro, is it fair that it suddenly stops working even though I shot the enemy first and for a longer period of time? Also, the functionality of the weapons are either very overpowered or very underpowered. This makes the gunplay in the game viable, but nothing more. You see, a game like Call of Duty uses something called a hit scan. This means that if a player is on target when they press the trigger, then it counts as a hit. Splatoon, on the other hand, uses projectiles, which is fair. I mean, we are spreading ink. However, this means that your shots act independently from you and your enemy model. If the projectile just so happens to hit your enemy, they'll take damage and die, making it a more skillful process. My problem is that the projectiles are inconsistent. A lot of pros call it RNG. In the case of the Splattershot Bro being too close to a target, my shots will start to whiff or blank. That's the reward for a shorter range weapon shooting you at a shorter range. No, the reward for a shorter weapon shooting me at a shorter range is the fact that it takes a shorter amount of time for the projectiles to turn lethal. It takes longer for my weapon to become lethal, with the reward of reaching greater distances. That is the reward. So as long as I hit all my shots on the enemy, I should be able to kill them first, given the fact that I shot first. Just because the person is in front of me and has a weapon built for short range encounters doesn't make it right that my long range weapon starts to blank blatant shots just so their weapon can fulfill their designated role. It's honestly downright unfair. Let's bring it back to COD for a moment. If I were using a pistol against someone with an AR at a mid-range encounter, does my pistol blank shots when I'm on target just because the other person was using a weapon more suited for the scenario we're in? No. Of course not. I mean, obviously my pistol is going to be harder to aim since I'm using it outside of its effective range, but my shots certainly won't go through my enemy like they're a ghost. With Mdog5, what if the opponent is touching you and you physically don't have the distance for your projectile to turn lethal since you have a longer range weapon? Well, then that's a problem, isn't it? I'd be on board with the projectiles being lethal immediately after it exits your weapon, just at a reduced damage until the projectile hits its designated range. Weapon consistency. Now earlier I pointed out the fact that projectiles are inconsistent. However, I think there are some weapons that have a designated ink move and then a designated splat move. For instance, the roller. The fact that ink flung from a horizontal roller throw results in lethal damage is insane to me.
My brother's still alive. Every time, man.
This should only be the case with the dynamo roller and when every other roller is being vertically tossed. Also, the NZAP takes absolutely no skill to use. I'm sorry. It's downright better than any other quote-unquote shooters in the game, and it has no notable weaknesses unlike every other weapon in its class. This is why I clown on people who use the NZAP past the rank of A-. The ink and octo brushes reward people for spamming their right trigger. For the record, if you want to kill one, you have to move in such a way that you are lined up vertically to them and at a distance, but it's hard enough to do when you have a squid that can run and ink just as fast as one can swim in their own ink. Personally, anyone who uses a brush against me gets blocked, and you know this if you watch my streams. You're definitely getting blocked, but you are not worth my time. I'm sorry, you are just not worth my time. Playing against you is pointless. You have 17 kills. That is not up at level 33. You think somebody that has played for like fucking 50 hours can come into a S+9 ranked lobby and just shit on everybody, get a 17 bomb? Fuck out of here. That's not a coincidence. Because the only reason why I know is because I fucking used to use it. I would play against streamers just because I'd fucking rank up so quickly using that stupid ass weapon, broken ass weapon. I haven't used it since 2017. What is your name? What is your name? ET, you're getting blocked. No cap. For using an NZAP. Damn. 1,400 hours and you still use an NZAP. That's sad. Yeah, you. Oh my gosh, you're getting blocked. You are getting blocked. Heavily. Then, they're the blasters. It wouldn't be so bad if they didn't have splash damage. Now, some blasters are skillful to use, seeing as you have to aim upwards at the opponent, but how many times have you been somewhere and a blaster shoots you? And because of the splash damage, the shot wasn't lethal, but you're now surrounded in enemy ink. And because you're surrounded in enemy ink, and because enemy ink acts like Gorilla Glue, you couldn't avoid the second shot, which actually was lethal. It's an annoying thing to deal with. Personally, I think the splash damage should be taken out and it should serve as direct hits. Sure, it keeps people from hiding when you have a general idea of where they are, but why are you being rewarded for having a general idea of where someone is, rather than knowing exactly where they are? If we remove splash damage from blasters, it would make weapons like the Clash Blaster so much more skillful. To wrap up the weapon critiques, it's worthy to note that there is basically no horizontal hit detection in the game, and that is due to the projectiles being thrown out of the weapon. This ensures that aiming from left to right or vice versa will have a delay. Obviously, this only affects you in certain situations, but it's nonetheless annoying when your reticle is dead on the enemy, and again, nothing happens. What? What?
Do I go for the kill? I guess I am now. Man, I had the blessed RNG.
No.
Zap is one
Yeah.
shot.
I would critique the ink drops coming out of straight firing weapons being lethal. Although it accounts for an insanely unnecessary amount of mutual kills, it's still less of an issue than this problem. The connection. Let me start off by saying that the connection in this game was nowhere near as bad as it was in Splatoon 1. But I mean, if you're anything above level 10 in Splatoon 2, I'm sure you've had a connection error in the game. Yet, you enter your Nintendo Switch home screen and you have a steady 3 bars. Your phone and other devices work perfectly fine and are connected to the internet. The game will even let you back into the lobby and into another game, indicative of the fact that there is nothing wrong with your internet. I know that video games these days can't fathom the difference between a disconnect and a loss, but Splatoon takes it to another level. The game kicked me out of the game. Splatoon kicked me out of the game twice in a row, and magically 2 cracks appeared on my rank meter, which is 4 to 6 losses otherwise. And actually that led into me being demoted because I lost once and I got demoted because literally 3 cracks appeared on my rank meter when it shouldn't have. And you know what's worse? It's worse when you get disconnected in the middle of a game that you were winning and then a crack appears on. Oh my god, that is infuriating. But it doesn't matter if you're a pro, tryhard, or a casual player. Within enough time, you'll see a connection error. Trust me. Even Octolings in single player disconnect. On one hand, you want to tell all your friends that don't own a Nintendo Switch that Splatoon 2 is a real AAA $60 game. But on another hand, you realize that you're playing on a $20 a year Nintendo membership, a Nintendo console, on a game that probably was made by 10 people with a $5,000 budget. At least it feels that way sometimes. My next critique is the competitive ranking system. Although some major improvements have been made from Splatoon 1's ranking system, there's still some major flaws. One of which is how fast it takes to decrease in rank versus how long it takes to improve your rank. I'm not looking at C, B, and A charts, but I'm staring at the S+ charts. I feel like simply demoting a player back down to their previous rank past the OK meter that was previously acquired would be so much better. If I just so happen to not make it to the OK meter on my current rank, I don't think it makes sense for me to go down to the previous rank prior to the OK meter that I've already gotten. This is because maintaining my rank otherwise would reset the meter with the meter being before the OK. So why do I have the same consequence for exceeding that entire rank? Basically, losing while doing better has the same consequences as losing while doing notably worse. People may argue that this is in place to prevent people with the skill of higher tier ranks to lessen, but what if I told you that this wouldn't even affect the pool of the high ranking players? I mean, maybe it will give the demoted players more experience, in turn making them slightly better, But the higher tier lobbies will not be affected with this change. Let's say someone gets lucky and gets into S+4. Now, they lost their S+4 rank because they simply weren't good enough to be there. Now they have another chance to go through S+3, of course pass their OK meter, and back to S+4. If they simply got lucky, they would get demoted again, but will have maintained their S+3 rank for the second time. If they get demoted again, I think it's a fair evaluation to think that they did not belong in S+4 to begin with. Now, the problem is that winning 10 to 13 games, usually mixed in with a few losses, takes the entire time that the game mode is on rotation. Therefore, it feels like a drawn-out wasted time when getting demoted. Your aspiring rank feels a lot less obtainable, and therefore getting demoted serves as fuel for demotivation instead of the exact opposite. If the goal still seems obtainable, then the setback will feel more reasonable and less of a hassle. With the change, we're simply gaining convenience without sacrificing the system. Now, with this point in the air, the ranking system might be fine if all the game modes were available at once. If Nintendo were nervous of player count, which they shouldn't be. I mean, if they made the online infrastructure better, I bet people will be coming back on to play Splatoon 2. But anyways, maybe the 6 million people that bought the game would actually stay on 4 years later if there weren't a connection error epidemic. Or if we could actually make meaningful connections without having to go to Discord. Which, I mean, come on, the casual player is not going to do all that. I wouldn't say Splatoon 2 is dying by any means, absolutely not. But I mean, I went on a different account. I found it kind of hard to get put in an A+ lobby, you know what I'm saying? I feel like every single player is probably lonely as hell playing Splatoon 2 because there's absolutely no way to communicate with any other person. I bet you if you had an actual friends list, if you can make meaningful connections, invite people into your lobby, play custom games, play games together, dude, a lot more people would stay on the game and probably buy the game. Instead of feeling lonely while playing your game. I mean, why else would you think that the player count is dwindling? Oh, you have Splatoon 2, 12 million people, right? I mean, there should be at least 100,000 people online at a time on Splatoon 2. At least, dude. Me, personally, again, the game's not dying, but I do come across people with the same names quite often. I'm telling you, I'll be in X rank and then I'll play another game mode in S+, and there we go. That's the same person there. I don't know. But it's not dying, but I feel like the player count could definitely be higher if Nintendo were to make those changes. I want you to tell me how this process sounds in the comment section down below, alright? Just listen. Every 12,000 points, you'll get 3 ability chunks. And for every win in ranked mode, depending on your rank, you'll get a little more or a little less than 2,000 points per game. You have a 0.001% chance of randomly getting all 3 of the same ability chunks on one piece of gear. So you pay a sea urchin 20,000 coins to get rid of the ability chunks so you can start over. Mind you, if you win a match, you get around 1,700 coins. But anyways, the chunks are saved on your gear, okay? But if you don't want to spend cash, then just re-roll for an equally or more trash ability chunk lineup, and the chunks you've replaced will be stored. The super snail shells were given out plentifully during the Splatfest, but the last Splatfest is long since over, and now they are few and far between. You'll get one every level, which already takes forever, but we'll get into that later. Say if you get a fresh piece of gear with 3 unfilled rolls that you want to fill up. You'll need about 10 of the same ability chunks saved up times the slot number. So if I want to get 3 of the same ability chunks for my gear, then I will have to not only get rid of and store 60 of the same ability chunks, but I'm also going to have to see 60 of the same ability chunks. In other words, I'm going to have to randomly get 60 of the same ability chunks and take the initiative to save each and every one of them. And I think there are about 20 different ability chunks, so good luck with that. Sheldon only gives you XP bonus tickets and coin bonus tickets, so I'm sorry, you can't do this alternative. But I got you with another alternative, okay? Just play Salmon Run and get the same bullshit ticket that doesn't even guarantee your chances of getting a certain piece of gear. One thing that I've noticed about players that have full weapon rolls or 3 or more pieces of gear is that they've played anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 hours. Luckily, there's an easy solution. The system itself isn't the thing that's bad, however, it's the process within that system. Lower the amount of chunks required to fill one. Instead of 10 chunks, How about 2 or 3? Then limit the amount of the same chunks you can have at once. Just give the player a notice while they're fitting their gear, like a connection error type of message. Or just make the clothing gray if they reach capacity by putting on said gear. This of course goes with the notion that Nintendo doesn't want players to have lots of the same abilities on their gear due to it being overpowered. Hence why they made the process of getting gear abilities so tedious. Honestly, everyone thinks this is an exaggerated process. I've asked World League players, watched them, and that SRB2 dude. And I mean, even they said that this is a fucking ridiculous process. Leveling. This isn't one that I'm losing sleep over, but it's still an issue nonetheless. Every player in Splatoon 2 knows that it takes way too long to level up in Splatoon. I've been playing Splatoon 2's multiplayer for over 100 hours. Obviously, I've been playing for longer. I'm just making up numbers for the sake of this example. And this comes from the official Splatoon 2 page. In regular battles, the XP gain depends on the amount of turf covered. If the player gets more than 500 points in the game, they'll get an additional 500 XP. Winning team gets a 300 time bonus, which is capped at 1400 XP. A one-time freshness bonus if your weapon is 5.0 to 15.0 freshness, which is about 10 to 30 wins with the same weapon. In ranked battles, the XP awarded depends on who won, obviously, knockout, timeout, and progress. Winning team gets a 1500 XP win bonus, and this changes throughout the rank. But knockouts will award the winning team an additional 1000 XP. But timeouts, which is an unfinished game, both teams get 500 XP for running down the time, in addition to 5 points for every percentage made. So 91%, which is 91 times 5, 455 XP. So basically, we'll say about 2,500 to 3,000 points per win. To get to level 30 in Splatoon 2, you'll need 965,900 XP points. That's close to 1 million XP points, everybody. I said XP points. That's close to 1 million experience points, everybody. No wonder why it takes so long to level up in Splatoon. Every level after 49 takes 100,000 points to level up. This means that there's a remainder of 149 levels after 49. 149 times 100,000 equals 14.9 million experience points and 15.8 million experience points to gain in total. This doesn't include levels 31 through 48. But since I'm a little over level 30 for this example, I'll say that I've gotten through 1 million XP, bringing it back to my point earlier. I've gotten 1 out of the 15 million experience points after 100 hours of playtime. This means that I have to play for, if we do the math here, 1,600 hours of Splatoon 2's multiplayer to get the max level in the game. But realistically, players who play 5 times that amount doesn't even have the maximum level, which is 99 and a star next to it. Tell me, do I need to say anything else? Salmon Run. This is a fun little game mode which actually gives players an incentive to play it. Your objective is to survive 3 rounds in a remote location, while a race called Salmonids swarm your location. There are normal, lower tier, and higher tier Salmonids. Then there are bosses who drop golden eggs. Your objective is to collect a certain amount of these eggs before the round ends to proceed to the next round. The more missions you complete, the higher your quote-unquote hazard level becomes, which basically increases the difficulty for the games you will be playing. Now, there are a variety of different bosses, which for the most part use special abilities found in multiplayer. In higher level runs, more of these bosses will appear and will definitely be your downfall if you don't act right. There are 10 of these bosses in total, 7 of which will appear in a normal round. Speaking of which, the non-normal rounds. Sometimes the tide surrounding your location will rise, limiting your area of operation. Other times, the tide will lower and the golden egg deposit will move to an entirely new location of the map, which was previously uncovered. Your teammates will annoyingly spam, this way, as if I don't have fucking eyes. There will be rounds where the sky darkens and the fog thickens, meaning the Salmonids will become more active and more deadly. Now, For the special modes, there's the Chinook mode, where salmonids will drop packages. So long as you kill the salmonid, a golden egg will drop. If not, a salmonid will spawn. Seems easy, right? There's actually no way in hell everyone can splat every single Chinook that falls from the sky. The Chinooks are paired with the mothership, which will attach itself to your golden egg deposit and will steal your golden eggs until you shoot at it for a certain period of time. There are the Drizzler rounds, the Goldie rounds, and rarely, you will be awarded Grisco special weapons. These weapons are basically very overpowered at the expense of high ink consumption. Every victory will award you points, which adds up towards the reward of coins, XP boosts, coin boosts, and or gear chunk tickets. There's also a specific piece of exclusive clothing that is held over your head for each rotation. You can get a reward per 3 wins on a lower rank and a few per win on a higher rank. So what's my problem with this game mode? I mean, at first it was fun, but 4 years in, it's kind of stale. I mean, we got new maps early on, but 4 years in, we should have at least 10 maps, which is twice as much as we have now. There's a recycling of rewards, which I've gotten all the exclusive gear already, and then the rewards that are there are pretty much useless to me. There's a point in the game where a player won't need to buy any new gear, which takes up the majority of their cash. Cash is the most valuable reward that is given to the player in Salmon Run. At this point in my career, there's no point in playing it, in my opinion. I mean, at the very least, they could have shaken it up a bit by having a larger weapon pool, and maybe if a player was able to pick a certain weapon out of that large weapon pool, then that same weapon wouldn't be available for anybody else to use for the rest of that game. Having Salmon Run gear available in multiplayer would have been cool too. Or having different Salmon Run gear that gives the player a certain boost would have been cool as well. Like a suit that gives higher swim speed, or ink resistance, or bomb defense, so on and so forth. These changes would make the player feel like they have more control over their own experience, which isn't really there. I mean, the maps we play on, the weapons we use, the bombs and specials we use, and the time that we're allowed to play the mode is all chosen for us. Also, the connection will bullshit you from time to time. It's not as bad as multiplayer, but sometimes players do disconnect from Salmon Run. When this happens, the game still treats you as though you have the entire team present. The enemies will be just as daunting as a 4VE, for a 3VE, or a 2VE. I mean, even your multiplayer rank won't go down if there's a player that disconnected halfway through the game, yet your Salmon Run rank will still go down regardless. At first, I was impressed with the amount of support Splatoon 2 got from the developers, new weapons, maps, patches, but ever since they jumped ship for Splatoon 3 in 2019, we're kinda left in the dark. Deep Sea Metro. Now, the Deep Sea Metro is the Octo expansion DLC that was added in 2018. It allows you to play as an Octoling in a series full of 80 levels. These levels are more unique and require much more skill than the story mode's levels. You're given an option between 2 or 3 different weapons. The easiest weapon to use for the level will give the player the least amount of cash yield upon completion. On the contrary, the hardest weapons give you the most. These levels really bring out the potential that Splatoon had with their missions in the first place. It also makes room for more fun levels with better objectives. With almost 4 times the amount of levels as the story mode, I can say with confidence that Nintendo did a better job with them as a whole. The rewards that you get are pretty rewarding, and it does a good job as a DLC. But does that mean I had a better time playing the expansion than I did the story? Well, to be completely honest, there was a handful of levels in the expansion that were overly tedious and downright annoying. This includes the levels where you couldn't step in enemy ink, which was a good concept, but the level was blatantly drawn out. All the Magic 8 Ball levels made me grind my teeth. The cash was there to simply make you feel more comfortable in losing, which you would spend before the level. This meant that if you lost, it's like you were wasting money. Respawning after you died cost more money, but the yield of cash that you would get after completing a level was always a decent amount. So decent that it never tempted the player to use harder to use weapons, which would give you a higher cash reward. As for the story, it was also decent. That's a problem because, I mean, you could just cheese through every level using the easiest weapon to use for that mission. I mean, yeah, the levels were hard, but there was no fear of losing the levels. And it honestly didn't force the players to make compromises that they weren't entirely comfortable with, which could have maybe ended up as a more difficult experience overall. I mean, Nintendo, you're used to making compromises, so what's good? I mean, you compromise every third-party game that comes on the Switch. It runs like shit because you just refuse to make a powerful console. I mean, the Switch OLED, what's going on, Nintendo? Come on. I'm just fucking with Nintendo at this point. As for the story, it was also decent. Basically, every set of levels were placed on a specific colored trail, and at the end of the trail, you were met with a boss. These bosses were only recolored versions of the ones in the story mode, but so were the enemies. This is because you play as an Octoling now, and in the story mode, you also fought Octarians, which Octolings are a species of Octarians, so I mean, why would they attack another Octarian? I guess these recolored Octarians hate Octolings, so that's that. Or I think they're actually zombies. I think that's officially what they were in the game, but whatever. After beating 4 bosses, you get to advance with the story, which only takes about half the total levels, which is good. If you choose to complete all the levels, however, you get a final boss fight, which is downright the worst one I've ever played, period. Nintendo introduces you to Inner Agent 8, which is an artificially difficult boss. Basically, Nintendo gives this bot insane superpowers and abilities to make it more difficult. Having a more powerful weapon than you, rolling abilities, 5 times as much health per phase, and 5 phases where it uses 5 different specials, made this one of the most annoying bosses I've ever fought in video game history. When you do manage to beat it, you get a golden hairpiece, which doesn't even look good on a squid or octoling. But hey, if you want to flex in game, use that, I guess. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you did down in the comment section down below. Again, make sure to check out the Fortnite documentary and the Call of Duty documentary. And of course, per request, I have a Fortnite candid documentary, mini documentary to give you guys. So I love you all. Stay tuned for that video coming out and watch those while you wait. See you guys next time.